Hello, friends. Uncle Marv here with another episode of the Unhealthy Podcast, the show where we talk about all those things that are unhealthy in our life and we don't like to talk about them. Well, on this show, we talk about them. Everything from our daily health and wellness to relationships to mindset. And today we are continuing with part 2 of our conversation with Greg Lee. If you remember from the last episode, he is the NASA engineer and IT guy who got knocked down by his own health issues, gut problems, brain fog, and all that fun stuff. And today he runs the Lyme Research and Healing Center in Frederick, Maryland. And Greg, welcome back.
Hey, Uncle Marv, glad to be back with you, man.
Okay. So I just want to do a quick, not a recap, but talk about the fact that we talked about, your journey and how you had your issues and they led you to acupuncture. And, then you got to the point where you uh, started to follow your bliss.
Yep.
But what we did not do on that show is talk about how you actually came to uh, lead this Lyme Research Healing Center. So, did Lyme disease pop up in your history at any point?
So when I graduated acupuncture school, I focused on chronic pain. And then a subset of people started coming to me diagnosed with something called fibromyalgia, which you have this chronic pain that lasts more than a couple months, and you have these points on your body that are sensitive to touch or sensitive to pressure, and that a lot of these patients do not do well with medications, or they do not improve with medications. When it rains, they have more symptoms. When it gets cold, they have more symptoms. Or when they eat certain things, it makes things worse. And so I began to work with these people, and it turned out one of them actually came to me and said, "Hey, I just got diagnosed with Lyme disease." And at the time, I, had not had much exposure to it in terms of treating patients, and there wasn't much research out there, mostly around medications that I could find. And there are other spirochete. Lyme is a spiral-shaped bacteria called a spirochete. There were other spirochete infections that are found in China that have been treated for hundreds of years. And so I looked those up and saw that there are certain herbs that are effective, like forsythia fruit, honeysuckle vine, something called hotunia, artemisia. And I began to give these herbs to patients, and their joint pain would get better. Their gut would feel less bloated, they would have more energy, they would sleep better. And so I was like, aha, great, we're onto something here. And I began to look at, you know, more complex herbs and things like that. And so I did more from chronic pain to from fibromyalgia to a Lyme disease practice. And every time I think, okay, I got it down, then another patient would come and they say, like, well, I have this chronic, shoulder pain that nothing's working, nothing's touching it. And I do everything I know how to do, acupuncture, herbs, cupping, and it wouldn't touch it. And so then I'd have to go and say, okay, I need to get something deeper into that shoulder. Or someone would come with brain issues, like inflammation, and how do I get things out of the brain? Or how do I get things into the brain? How do I heal what's going on in there? And this led me to go to different conferences and train with other practitioners. And I discovered a colleague of mine was using this scanning device, and he was using it with autism spectrum patients. And he was making these great improvements with them by finding out, scanning that they had these hidden infections, they had toxicity issues, they had genetic mutations, which block their ability to detox toxins and metals. And so I'm like, yeah, I need this. And so I began working with him and learning about this scan and applying it to my patients. So now we do this advanced scan with all of our patients when they come in to determine what is going on with them. What are the, not only the symptoms, but what are the underlying factors? What's going on with the immune system? What's going on with infections, toxins? What's going on with the brain? What's going on with the gut? and looking at things from a functional medicine perspective, from a Chinese medicine perspective, that we can all look at through this advanced scan. So that is how I keep nutshelling it into this is like Star Trek medicine. You have a holodoc with a scanner, and it's just like, okay, this is what we
Right.
found in your scan.
So on the last show, you talked about the patient that came in, the 2-star general, and at the
Well,
time you
she
mentioned.
was a government employee, had the equivalent rank of a two-star
Oh,
general. She was a
okay,
high level.
okay, equivalency. Um, but I
Yeah,
think you had mentioned that it was a hand scanner that you were able to do
yes.
that, but it seems to me that at some point, in order to find a parasite in the gut or whatever, is there a whole body scanner that would do that, or can you actually do it from the hand scanner?
Do it from the hand.
Really?
Do it from the hand. Yes, and because there's very little resistance to electricity in the body,
Okay.
and you send the electrical frequencies in, and you can read the response back.
So it
So,
basically sends signals all throughout the body, and does it map to like a human figure on a screen or something like that, like you see in the in the Star Trek where.
it used to kinda do a crude version of that, but now they don't do that. It just gives you back numbers that we interpret
Oh, okay.
to different levels of infection or liver function or toxin levels, things like that.
Interesting. So, all right, so I'm gonna do a quick sidebar here. A few episodes ago, I talked about the fact that I purchased a ring com, and a lot of us are, using these smart rings, Fitbit trackers, or similar devices, which is giving us information about our body. Usually things like, our levels, our blood levels, oxygen levels, helping us sleep and stuff like that. How far off are we from being able to do stuff like that with these smart devices versus the type of scanner that you're using?
How far off? How Right now, the wearables don't have the software or they're measuring different things that uh, you probably would need a larger surface area to scan like we're doing now.
Okay,
So, like somebody wearing a shirt that has, conductive material, uh, that would probably be the equivalent. Hopefully within 5 years, maybe sooner, our wearables should be able to pick up, these more subtle signals, but it's really a matter of the software, and then hopefully someone will develop the software to interpret them and give you back a Star Trek-like image of the body that shows what's going on in different areas.
interesting. Okay, back to your real life stuff here. So you've got the scanner. It's a hand model now. How long does it take, where you place your hand on it to actually map the body?
So we don't map the whole body. What we do, since we treat infectious disease, we do kind of different scans, the different iterations of the scan. The first one often looks for what are the biggest issues that pop out, whether it be infections, toxins, immune system issues, detox blocks, neurological issues. And then based on that, we can drill down into if we find a particular thing like a parasite, like in the woman in the last episode, what kind of parasite is it? Where is it located? How prevalent is it in the system? How much, is it the main gang leader of all the infections, or is it just kind of a bit player? And kind of giving that sense of what, how its importance in terms of when do we need to treat it, either initially or perhaps down the road.
Okay, interesting. Now, when we're looking at this, and I'm just going to now parallel this to a lot of the alternative medicine that we deal with holistic, functional medicine and stuff. This actually doesn't, to me, it doesn't fall into that alternative medicine category because it's actually technology. Um, But where would this fit? Because this doesn't sound like something you're gonna get at a regular hospital.
No, this is not currently is more of an experimental system. It's not FDA approved for diagnosis. So the FDA has examined the system and said, hey, you can use this to make a medical hypothesis. So that's how we use it.
Mm,
And that helps us to then say, okay, this scan would likely indicate the presence of Lyme disease in this patient's brain, kind of thing. And based on that, we will then put together, we can test actually in the scan system what happens when we apply the electronic version of this herb or essential oil or supplement. What happens to the infection? Does it go down? Does it go up? Does it, do nothing? And based on that, we can get a sense of like what are the top treatments, remedies that may be optimal for that person. And you do the same thing on another person with Lyme disease, you'll get different remedies, different treatments that are optimal for them because they're different. They detox differently, they have different inflammation, their immune system may be more stronger or weaker, who knows?
hmm,
So
okay,
it's very individualized.
right. Now, you did talk about too, on the last show that when you did the scan, you actually treated with herbs at first, right?
Yes.
None of those herbs sound like something I can run down to, Whole Foods or Sprouts and find, or are they?
Some of them you can.
Really?
Whole
Okay.
Foods, yeah, Whole Foods has some of, I mean, it's not necessarily it's just because you know an herb treats something, you have to understand what's the right amount, what's the right dosage, is it at the right time for that person and their issue? Because what we find is a lot of our patients, they'll like go to a doctor and they'll get medications and they'll kill off a ton of infection, which then releases lots of toxins and that flares up their symptoms and flares up their inflammation. And they have what they call a Herxheimer reaction, which is this toxic reaction after you kill off infections. And a lot of patients that have been through these can be severe, people have actually died from these reactions or been knocked unconscious. I had one woman, she was diagnosed with Lyme, got one of the standard antibiotics, doxycycline, and she found out that she had a strong reaction to it, which knocked her unconscious, and she actually broke her shoulder falling to the ground after being knocked out after taking the doxycycline. So that's, you know, some of the things that we deal with patients is that they can't take the antibiotics. They need natural alternatives that they can better tolerate, or they can't detox because there's blocks. So we have to open the blocks first. And then once those are open, then we can do more antimicrobials. So it's kind of like a sequence.
Hmm.
You build the rocket, you put the payload on, you make sure it's fueled up, all the astronauts are belted in, and then you can go, you know.
All right. So the bottom line is if you've got something that you're trying to fix in yourself, you still should see somebody. Don't just run down and grab some herbs and follow somebody on social media. and
Or an AI that tells you, "Oh, yeah, do this," remedy and this thing.
Well, AI is interesting. It's because a lot of people are going there to ask the questions. I'll just go ahead and segue into that since you brought it up. How many of your patients do you get after they have tried to self-diagnose by going to the Google or AI?
I would say at least 60, 70% of our
Wow,
patients
that
do
high.
Google or AI and yeah, and that high, yeah, because what their experiences with doctors is, "Okay, we've done a blood test and it's normal, so we're not gonna treat you because we can't find anything on blood test. You are your test." Or they go to a more educated practitioner that says, "Okay, I know the tests aren't accurate. I'm gonna treat you anyway based on your symptoms or other clinical diagnoses." And then they have this huge Herxheimer reaction, this die off, they can't detox, and their gut blows up, and so on. And then they go to Google and say, what else can I do? What are natural remedies? What are things that it won't make me blow up like that antibiotic did? And then we see most of the people we see have done some sort of searching and or AI analysis of their symptoms.
Okay. Now, I imagine that you probably get a lot of people reaching out that are not necessarily close to you um, in Maryland. So, do you try to talk to people outside of where you are?
We always talk to anybody, whoever wants to talk to us. And according to my licensing board, I need to see patients in person for the first appointment. In fact, we just had a woman come in over from the UK. She actually runs a school over there. And, unfortunately, in the UK, there's less proactive treatment for Lyme disease there, even though there's ticks all over England. And the medical system is there's a slow to respond or they deny it, treatment for patients. And so it can be very challenging for them. And so I've had multiple people from the UK, Europe, uh, Middle East, South America, Central America, Canada fly in for treatment and get scanned. And the great thing is that when these people come in, they're like, I've been treated for Lyme. This one was treated from the UK for Lyme for 5 years. And I'm still relapsing. I'm still crashing after when I hit summer break, then I just like smash, I'm done. And so when we scanned her, we found, oh, yes, there is Lyme, but it's not really that active. Your biggest issue is something called candida, which often happens when you have lots of antibiotics come in and they kill off the healthy bacteria in your gut. Then things like candida, which is a yeast, can then grow in its place and create similar symptoms to Lyme disease. So the scan helps us to really differentiate, okay, no, let's not continue your treatment of Lyme that you've done for several years. Let's treat what we actually are finding, what we can pick up. We measure it.
Interesting. So, I was going to ask you in a later question about how much of what you're doing is still related to Lyme and research, and how much is other stuff.
Well, a lot of people come in thinking it's Lyme, and it ends up being other stuff. We had the kind of like the most out there thing. We had one woman, she lived in Georgia. She probably still lives in Georgia. And she came, she has relatives in the area, and she would come up and say, hey, I need to get treatment for Lyme disease. She'd been treating Lyme for 3 years, relapse, pain, fatigue, brain fog. And so when we did the scan on her, we said, the biggest issue that we found in your scan isn't Lyme disease, it's tarantula toxins. And, it was just like,
As in the
what?
spider tarantula?
Tarantula spider toxins. And it actually said it's from the species of tarantula. I don't remember what the species is. And it's found in the southeastern US, especially in Florida. And she goes, oh, I went on vacation on the beach in Florida and I got this really weird blister on my ankle that I thought it was just like kind of some weird sun reaction. And we looked at the area and said, yeah, this tarantula is found in that area of Florida. So, it just helps bring a lot of clarity to when people think, their practitioners think it's Lyme, it's Lyme, it's Lyme, it's Lyme, but it can be something else. And helping to find what that is, then we can treat it. And then the woman goes after treatment. I wish I would have came to you 3 years ago.
Mm,
So
wow.
that's what we hear over and over again. I wish I would have came to you. Like tons of stories like that, over and
Well,
over.
I mean, that's easy to say after the fact, but the simple matter is there aren't a lot of you around. Am I
Yeah,
correct in thinking that?
I'm kind of a unicorn in that in that
Okay.
way. Yeah,
Um, so let me ask this now. I'm going to backtrack because I remember when we first met, and you talked about your crazy uncle with the bee venom.
right.
Is he still crazy to you now, or do you
Oh, no.
look no?
We use therapy. In fact, I just submitted a conference presentation on how we had this one brilliant college kid. I mean, I'm no dummy, but this kid was just like he would speak, and I'm like, "Oh my god, you're like Einstein level," and I feel really stupid. No, I hadn't even felt that way ever until I met this kid. And he was going to George Mason, which is a college down in Virginia here, and he got sick and ended up that he couldn't continue with the studies. And basically, when he came to me, he was living at home with his parents, working in a burger joint. And so he came down, and his doctor in New Jersey had been treating him for Lyme disease for 1 to 2 years, still relapsing pain, fatigue, joint pain, brain fog. And then when we scanned him, we said, "Oh, yeah, you have Lyme, but you also have this other infection that ticks can transmit. It's a protozoa called Babesia. It's just like malaria, but you instead of mosquitoes, it's transmitted by ticks, and it can create joint pain, fatigue, brain fog, all the symptoms he was having." And we go through treatment, and he's like, "Oh, I'm better. I'm having more energy. My joint pain's better, but I have this one symptom that isn't improving, and it's I don't have very good short-term memory." And so, like, I'd ask him, "What'd you have for dinner 2 nights ago?" He couldn't remember. But he was so smart, he could, like, trace it back. It would take him a little while. He'd have to think, and he goes, "Oh, I had chicken." But you could see it was a struggle. And he got memory testing, and his memory was still intact, but he just couldn't access it. So, given that there are certain infections which can create like depolarization, deconnection in different brain regions, that was the theory that I went, okay, the babesia is in his nervous system, so that's where we scanned it, and we need to do more aggressive treatment because he was doing herbals, he was doing supplements, homeopathics, but it wasn't like clearing the stuff out of his brain. So we took bee venom and he snorted it and to get it into his brain.
Uh, on purpose?
Yeah, that's what we said. You're gonna put this. You had him lay on a table. We put it in his nose, and he inhaled it, and it created this huge die-off reaction, almost like he could say, like, "Whoa, what was that?" And being like a 21-year-old, he didn't complain or anything. It was just like, "Wow." And after about 20 minutes, we did other treatments, something called cupping and bloodletting to pull toxins out quickly out of the head, frequency specific microcurrent and neutralize zap toxins electrically. And after 20-25 minutes, he goes like, "Okay, I'm feeling better." And it was just like, it was such a dramatic change. Like he turned red. He looked like like a beet. And I was just like, whoa. And I said, "Are you okay to drive home?" He goes, "Yeah, I'm fine." And on the ride home, he gets a call from a buddy he knew in college. It's been several years since he'd been in college. Talks to him, hangs up, calls me and says, "Hey, I just talked to blah, blah, blah from college. I'm remembering things I haven't remembered in 3 years. Thanks." And after that, he kept getting more and more of the bee venom treatment, and the flare up Herxheimer reaction would get less and less and less. And eventually I just said, "Here, take it home and keep doing it." And now he's no longer living at home, no longer working in a burger joint, graduated engineering school, owns his own company in California, has a family, and feels like, not have suffering any effects like he was when he was in his 20s.
Hmm. All right. So the listeners I know are in their head thinking, okay, yeah, I've got some issues, but I don't think mine will ever rise to that level where I'll be taking bee venom. But
This is not a do it yourself. You need to work with somebody. Don't do this at home. I
well,
know everybody on podcast gets crazy ideas like, "Oh, this is biohacking. I'll go do that." No, don't do that.
from what I
Talk
know
to me
about,
first.
from what I've heard about biohacking, I don't think I could ever recommend that to anybody. But I do want to
Yeah.
ask because it seems as though if you don't n- think or know that you have Lyme disease, but you have other chronic symptoms, what would bring a person to your facility or at least reach out to you? Because it sounds like it's almost an idea. Well, if nothing else works, let me call the Lyme Research Center.
That's often the people we get
Okay.
because they go to the regular doc, they may or may not get antibiotics, and then that helps or doesn't help, or then those things come back. Then they search out and go to what's called a Lyme literate practitioner who then gives them more intense antibiotics over a longer duration. And that may, help for a while, but then somehow the symptoms come back, even though they've been on these antibiotics for months. In some cases, we had one woman, 5 years, continuous antibiotics, no break, still sick. And so these are the people that we see most often. We do get some people that says, I can't take the antibiotics. I tried it before. I need to go natural. And they haven't been through the whole like years of antibiotic therapy just because they know it won't work or they can't tolerate it. And those are the other kinds of people that we get.
Okay.
And yeah.
All right. So I want to go back to the scanner. And outside of what you've told us already, what are the other things that it can do? Like what's the full range of the scanner, or are there different scanners for different things?
So there are different software libraries you can scan for, whether it be infections, toxins, parasites, viruses, mold, fungi issues, brain regions, functional medicine issues. So you mentioned you had functional medicine practitioners on. My colleague who helps me with the scan, he's trained in functional medicine, homeopathy, Chinese medicine, herbal, essential oils, frequency medicine. And so we work together and we do the scan on patients and look at it from those different systems of medicine and say, okay, since my background was integrating spacecraft, like I worked on spacecraft INT, I have the brain that goes, okay, I have all these different systems. I need to bolt on a rocket and shoot it up into orbit. I can do that with medicine. I have all these different medicine systems. I can see where they intersect and then how they can work together in helping this patient get better more quickly.
Very interesting.
Sorry.
That's all
Sorry.
right.
I
This,
left the speeches. Yeah. Sorry,
um,
Sorry, Marv.
it's okay. So all the things that you can find out about at the Lyme Research Healing Center, I want to make sure we um, mention that again, and mention that you can go to the website, folks, and not only, hear some of the stories, become a patient. You've got a community there that people can actually join and be a part of. You've got, there's some leading podcasts there. Um, there's a Lyme mold assessment that they can get,
Yep.
and all of that. What else comes with that community?
So it is a live weekly training community at lymeresearchcenter.com/HFR. It's capital H, capital F, capital R. And I give like, hey, like this month, we've been doing trainings on healing what's called small intestine bacterial overgrowth, irritable bowel syndrome, gut issues, and what's working, what are the basic foundations, went over a case study, and then also demoing this past week what are the top treatments that are helping patients. Because it's great to read about stuff, but how do you know when to do a treatment? How do you know when to sequence it? How much do you start off with in terms of a remedy versus doing too much and then the patient has a blow up? So we talk about all these things and dialogue with that in the training because having worked with over 1,000 patients, we have a lot of clinical experience that we can share and help other practitioners, other patient advocates to learn how to safely and effectively use natural treatments and remedies for healing not only SIBO IBS, but Lyme, co-infections, mold, mast cell, many other kinds of conditions. So we've been doing this for several years. Not only do you get the live training every week, and the dialogue with me, you also get the archive of over 220 replays of previous trainings on a wide range of infectious disease toxins and pain syndromes, healing those. So that's again, lymeresearchcenter.com/HFR,
Mhm.
capital HFR.
All right, and this would be a way
Yeah.
that people can kind of get access to you without having to
Yeah.
go to Maryland and see you in person.
Yes. It doesn't you don't get to be a patient, but you get to get kind of like an inside view into what's working in our clinic, what and we do when we do a case study, we do a very detailed, uh, from when they came before, their history, what the main issues are, what changed over the course of several months of treatment, and what was the end result. What helped them ultimately to get, back to near 100% functionality. So,
Okay. All
yeah,
right. So
it's
that is
rocking out, man.
what was that?
It's rocking out, man.
Yeah. So be sure to check the show notes for that. But he gave you, it's very simple to remember, lymeresearchcenter.com/HFR, all caps. Let me go back one more time to the scanner. And
One more.
one more time, because you mentioned at the beginning you watch Star Trek,
Mhm.
and Star Trek is known for the tricorders.
Yes.
So the scanner, is there going to be a point in time where that scanner is going to be just like the tricorder from Star Trek?
I ideally, yes, and, as we saw with the next generation and the futuristic Star Trek, you don't hold the big tricorder that McCoy had. You have these little
Well,
you can
yeah,
sit
not
on a
not the
belly
one with the
stand.
strap.
Yeah. So, yes, ideally, that's something we actually are working with an AI researcher right now who's creating medical models for medical school education. We want to take our scan data, populate his system with it, and get a near real time, like model of a actual patient. And then we can test in there treatments, remedies to see what may be useful, testing it digitally before we try it on the patient to help, reduce, misfires or remedies and treatments that may not be effective. We isolate the ones that may be the most optimal ones ahead of time.
Interesting. So the body, would it be just a general body where you would see what the, interactions and reactions are? Or could you take somebody's symptoms, impress them onto that AI body, and then work with it? Is that where we're going?
We're we're still in the beginning phases, and
Okay.
ideally, it would I think my ideal, but was hasn't been manifested in reality yet, it would be either like a 3D virtual reality or augmented reality, uh, image you could travel through and work with and actually apply different things into it. So you'd have an interactive, but that's probably several versions down the road. Right now, it's, still in the, like, early development phase, so
All right. Well, we're going to have to monitor that, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of interest in
yeah,
that, both in the medical field, the tech field,
yeah,
and the
a
the intersection of tech and medicine is going to be very interesting over the next few years.
and if someone wants to help fund this research, we are very happy to talk to you about this and receive your support and help advance medicine into the age of Star Trek.
All right. Very nice. Greg, thank you very much for spending time with me on both of these episodes, and giving us a little bit of insight into what you do, and certainly to help people that have those chronic unknown issues, giving them some place to go and try to find some relief.
Awesome. This has been great, Marv. I really appreciate you spending the time, and I loved your questions, and, look forward to, helping your members.
Well, I think we're going to have to check back in, because I want to follow that AI research for one. And two, there's always, I want to hear more stories next time. If I know that you can't, give out too much information, but you seem to have some good stories. So there's probably people in the audience that have been like, oh, I have something similar to that. So hearing some of the stories of what that scanner does might be a episode down the road.
Yeah. Awesome.
All right.
Looking forward to it.
Thank you, sir. And those of you listening to the show, thank you for tuning in. And if this episode spoke to you, of course, reach out to Greg and the Lyme Research Healing Center using the links in the notes. He's going to have a profile on the Unhealthy Podcast website. Follow the
Woo.
show in your favorite podcatcher. And that's going to do it, folks. If you've got stuff that you just quite can't shake it, you may want to give Greg and his people a listen. And if you're near the Maryland area, near his shop there, uh, go check out that scanner. So
Yeah.
I'd love to hear more about that. So thank you very much, Greg. Thank you very much, folks. That's going to do it. And we'll be back with another episode real soon. But until then, live healthy and be happy.